She arrived early in the morning, long before the hall filled with noise and excitement. The building stood tall and modern, made of glass and stone, shining under the soft daylight. Inside, workers moved chairs, cleaned the stage and tested lights. For most people, it was just another competition venue. For her, it felt heavy, almost overwhelming. She stood near the entrance for a moment, holding her small bag tightly, taking everything in. She had traveled a long way to get here. The journey included crowded trains, long flights, and nights without proper rest. Every step had been planned carefully, because there was no room for mistakes. Money was limited. Comfort was not a priority. What mattered was this chance. A chance she had worked toward quietly for years. She did not come with a large group or loud supporters. No proud parents walking beside her. No manager giving instructions. No cameras following her steps. She walked alone, calm on the outside, but with a storm of thoughts inside her mind. She reminded herself why she was here. She had practiced for this moment since she was very young, often late into the night, when the world around her was asleep. The registration desk was already open. Contestants were lining up, some laughing, some stretching their fingers, some talking about famous teachers they had studied under. Many wore elegant clothes, expensive shoes, and confident smiles. They looked like they belonged here. She noticed how different she seemed from them. Her clothes were simple, clean, but plain. Her shoes were worn but polished carefully. She lowered her gaze and waited her turn. When she handed over her papers, the staff member glanced at her form, then at her face and paused for a second. There was no smile, just a quick nod. She was given a number and told where to wait. She thanked them softly and stepped aside. No one paid much attention to her after that. She found a quiet corner near the practice rooms. The walls were thin, and piano sounds leaked through. Fast scales, dramatic pieces, confident playing. Some performances sounded impressive, but rushed. Others were technically perfect but empty. She listened carefully, not to compare herself, but to calm her nerves. Music had always been her safe place. Her mind drifted back to where it all began. A small home, far from big stages and bright lights. An old piano that had missing paint and keys that were slightly uneven. She remembered how her fingers first touched those keys, how sound filled the room, how something deep inside her responded. No one forced her to practice. She practiced because she wanted to, because music felt like the only language that fully understood her. She had no famous teacher in the beginning. Lessons came from old books, recorded videos, and long hours of trial and error. When others her age were playing outside, she was sitting on a hard bench, repeating the same piece again and again until it felt right. Sometimes her fingers hurt. Sometimes she cried quietly so no one would hear. But she never stopped. Back in the hall, the crowd slowly grew. The sound level increased. Laughter echoed through the space. Judges arrived in groups, dressed sharply, greeting one another with confidence. Some were well-known figures in the music world. People whispered their names with admiration. She watched them from a distance. They looked powerful, sure of themselves, used to deciding who was worthy and who was not. As contestants were called for sound checks, she noticed how judges reacted to certain players. Smiles appeared quickly for confident performers. Nods followed impressive introductions. But when she walked past, carrying her bag close to her side, the reaction was different. A few quick glances, raised eyebrows, a faint smile that did not feel kind. She sat on a chair near the back and waited. She kept her hands warm by gently moving her fingers, a habit she had developed over the years. Her face remained calm, but inside she felt the weight of being unseen, underestimated. She was used to it. This was not the first time people judged her before hearing her play. At one point, she overheard a quiet laugh nearby. It was not loud, but clear enough. Someone made a comment about how surprising it was to see her here. Another voice replied with a joke. They did not mean for her to hear, but she did. She did not turn around. She did not react. She simply took a slow breath and looked down at her hands. Those hands told her real story. Not words, not appearances. Her fingers carried years of discipline, failure, improvement, and silent victories. They had memorized thousands of notes, rhythms, and emotions. They were ready. She closed her eyes briefly and imagined the piano she would soon sit at. She imagined the weight of the keys, the sound of the first note, the way the hall would respond. She reminded herself that the piano did not judge. It only responded to honesty. An announcement echoed through the speakers, calling the first group of performers. Applause followed. The competition had officially begun. People leaned forward in their seats. Judges picked up their pens. Expectations filled the room. She remained seated, waiting for her number to be called. Around her, others talked confidently about winning, about future concerts, about recognition. She said nothing. She listened. She observed. She conserved her energy. In her heart, she carried a simple thought. She was not here to impress anyone with words or looks. She was here to tell her story through music. Whether they listened or not was out of her control. But when her moment came, she would give everything. As the day moved forward, performances came and went. Some received strong applause. Others left the stage quickly, faces tense. The judges remained serious, sometimes whispering to one another, sometimes shaking their heads. She watched carefully, learning the mood of the room. She noticed how quickly opinions formed, how easily people were labeled. It strengthened her resolve. She knew that when her turn arrived, it would not be easy. The laughter, the doubt, the low expectations were already present. But she also knew something else. The piano had never failed her. It had been with her through loneliness, through struggle, through hope. And soon it would speak again, this time on a stage where no one expected it. She stood up quietly when her number was called for the upcoming round. Her heart beat faster, but her steps were steady. The story was just beginning. The hall felt very different once the competition truly began. Every sound seemed louder, every movement more noticeable. Chairs scraped softly against the floor as people shifted in their seats. Pages of music rustled. Judges leaned forward, pens ready, eyes sharp. The air carried a mix of excitement and quiet tension. She stood near the side of the hall, watching one performance after another. Some players walked onto the stage with confidence, shoulders back, heads high. Others looked nervous, their steps unsure. Each performance brought a new reaction from the judges. Small nods, raised eyebrows, sometimes quick notes written down without much emotion. As time passed, she became more aware of how people around her reacted to different contestants. Those who looked confident were often treated with respect before even touching the piano. Those who looked uncertain were watched closely, almost waiting for a mistake. She noticed this pattern clearly. It did not surprise her. She had seen it many times before. When she walked toward the practice area to warm up her fingers, a few heads turned. Conversations paused briefly. She felt eyes on her back. Someone whispered something, followed by soft laughter. It was not cruel laughter, but it was not kind either. It carried the sound of disbelief, as if her presence itself was a joke. She did not respond. She had learned long ago that reacting only wasted energy. Instead, she sat down at a small practice piano and gently pressed a few keys. The sound was quiet and uneven, but familiar. Her fingers moved slowly at first, then more freely. With each note, her breathing steadied. Nearby, other contestants practiced loudly, showing off speed and strength. Some played difficult passages again and again, trying to impress anyone who might be listening. She did not try to be loud. She focused on clarity, touch, and balance. She knew that real music did not need to shout. A short break was announced. People stood up, stretching, checking their phones, talking about scores and judges. She remained seated, hands resting on her lap. She listened more than she spoke. This had always been her way. Not far from her, a group of judges stood together, speaking freely now that the audience was distracted. Their voices were low but not careful enough. One of them glanced in her direction and smiled slightly. Another shook their head, saying something that made the group chuckle. She did not hear every word, but she understood the meaning. They did not expect much from her. The realization did not hurt as much as it once might have. Instead, it brought a strange calm. Expectations, she had learned, could be heavy. When no one expected anything, there was freedom. She thought about her past again, about the many times she had played for rooms that were not interested. School events where people talked over her music. Small gatherings where applause came more from politeness than feeling. She had learned to play not for reaction, but for truth. The break ended, and the next round of performances began. Her number was getting closer. She stood near the entrance to the stage area now, waiting. A staff member checked numbers and quietly directed contestants where to go. When she stepped forward, the staff member glanced at her briefly, then pointed toward the waiting chairs near the stage. The look was neutral but distant. She thanked them softly and sat down. From this spot, she could clearly see the judges. Their faces were serious, but their posture relaxed, as if they already knew how things would go. They adjusted their papers, whispered to one another, and waited. The performer before her finished their piece with dramatic movement. The final note rang out, and applause followed. The judges clapped politely, some more than others. A few quick comments were exchanged as scores were written down. Then there was a pause. Her number was called. She stood up slowly. For a brief moment, the room felt very quiet. Not because people were excited, but because they were curious. Some leaned back in their chairs. Others glanced at one another. A few smiles appeared, the kind that come before a joke. She walked onto the stage with steady steps. The lights were brighter here, warmer, almost blinding. She could not clearly see the audience, only shapes and shadows. The piano stood in the center, polished and perfect, waiting. As she approached the bench, she felt the familiar mix of nerves and focus. Her heart beat faster, but her hands were steady. She adjusted the bench carefully, the way she always did. Small details mattered. Before sitting, she looked briefly at the judges. Their expressions were controlled, but not encouraging. One leaned back slightly. Another tapped a pen against the table. No one smiled. She sat down. The room seemed to hold its breath, though not with hope. More with expectation of something ordinary. Perhaps even something disappointing. She placed her hands gently on her lap and took a slow breath. She did not rush. This pause was not for effect. It was for grounding herself. For reminding herself where she was and why she had come. Her fingers hovered above the keys, just for a moment. She could feel the smooth surface beneath them, cool and familiar. This piano was different from the one back home, but the language was the same. In that quiet second before the first note, she shut out everything else. The judges, the audience, the laughter from earlier. None of it mattered now. Only the music did. Her fingers lowered toward the keys, and the moment everyone had underestimated was about to begin. The first note came softly. It was not loud or dramatic. It did not rush forward. It settled into the room like a calm breath. For a moment, nothing else moved. The sound carried a quiet confidence, steady and clear, as if it knew exactly where it belonged. A few people shifted in their seats. Someone in the audience stopped whispering. The judges looked up, not fully yet, but enough to notice that this opening was different. The second note followed, then the third. Each one was placed with care. There was no struggle, no hesitation. The melody began to form, gentle but purposeful. It was not a piece meant to impress right away. It was a piece meant to speak. Her posture was relaxed, but focused. Her shoulders stayed low. Her wrists moved naturally. Her fingers did not slam the keys or pull away sharply. They pressed and released with balance, letting the sound breathe. Within seconds, the mood in the hall began to change. The quiet was no longer casual. It was attentive. One judge leaned forward slightly. Another stopped tapping their pen. Pages stopped turning. The room listened. As the melody developed, it carried emotion without force. It felt personal, almost private, as if the music was telling a story meant for anyone willing to hear it. The notes flowed smoothly, connecting one phrase to the next without breaking the mood. People who had smiled earlier now sat still. Their expressions changed, slowly, almost without them realizing it. The piece grew more complex. Her left hand moved with control, steady and strong, supporting the melody without overpowering it. Her right hand danced lightly, shaping the sound with precision. Every movement felt intentional, not rehearsed for show, but lived. A few rows back, someone leaned forward, elbows on knees. Another crossed their arms, eyes fixed on the stage. The hall felt smaller now, more intimate, as if the music had pulled everyone closer. The judges exchanged quick glances. Not comments, just looks. The kind that said something unexpected was happening. She moved into a more difficult section without any visible effort. Fast passages came and went cleanly. There were no missed notes, no uneven rhythm. But more importantly, there was feeling behind every phrase. The music rose and fell naturally, like breathing. Her face remained calm, not empty, but peaceful. She was not performing for approval. She was inside the music, letting it guide her. The audience felt it. Somewhere in the middle of the piece, the energy shifted completely. What began as quiet curiosity turned into respect. The earlier laughter felt far away now, almost embarrassing to remember. One judge adjusted their chair and leaned closer to the table. Another stopped writing entirely, watching her hands instead. Their expressions were no longer relaxed. They were alert. The music softened again, pulling back from intensity. The change was subtle but powerful. The sound grew delicate, almost fragile. Felt like a memory being shared. No one coughed. No one moved. The silence between the notes was just as important as the notes themselves. Her fingers slowed, giving space to the sound. Each pause carried weight. The audience followed every breath, every shift in tempo, without realizing they were doing it. She had played this piece many times before, but never like this. Something about the room, the doubt, the low expectations, it all melted into the music. She was not trying to prove anyone wrong. She was simply telling the truth. As the piece began to build again, strength returned to her playing. The melody grew fuller. The harmonies deepened. Her hands moved faster now, confident and sure, but never rushed. The sound filled the hall completely. It was rich, warm, and alive. A judge who had smiled earlier now sat completely still, eyes fixed on the keyboard. Another nodded slowly, almost without noticing. The audience felt a shared tension, not nervous, but emotional. Something meaningful was unfolding, and they did not want to miss it. Her control remained steady through the most demanding parts. Difficult runs flowed smoothly. Strong chords landed with balance, not force. Everything felt intentional. As the music reached its peak, emotion poured into the sound. Not loud emotion, but deep emotion. The kind that comes from years of quiet work, from sacrifice, from understanding loss and hope. Some people felt a tightness in their chest. Others swallowed hard. They did not know why they felt this way. They only knew that the music had reached them. The final section approached slowly. The energy began to settle, like waves calming after a storm. Her hands eased into softer dynamics, guiding the piece toward its ending. The last notes were gentle, almost whispering. She allowed them to fade naturally, holding the final sound just long enough for it to disappear on its own. Her hands lifted from the keys. The silence that followed was heavy. Not awkward. Not unsure. It was full. For a brief moment, no one reacted. The judges did not move. The audience did not clap. It felt as if everyone needed a second to return from wherever the music had taken them. Then someone began to applaud. Another joined. Within seconds, the hall filled with applause. Not polite applause. Real applause. Strong and honest. The judges straightened in their seats. Some clapped immediately. Others looked down at their papers, then back at her, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. She stood up slowly and bowed, her expression calm and respectful. She did not smile widely. She did not look proud. She looked grateful. As she stepped away from the piano, she felt a quiet release inside her chest. Whatever happened next, she had done what she came to do. She walked off the stage without looking back, leaving behind a room that no longer doubted her. And for everyone watching, one truth was now impossible to ignore. They had been wrong. The applause did not stop right away. It rolled through the hall, steady and strong, filling every corner. Some people clapped while standing. Others remained seated but applauded just as hard. Faces that once carried doubt now showed surprise, respect, and something close to admiration. She stood near the edge of the stage for a moment, unsure if she should bow again. She decided against it. One bow was enough. She turned and walked toward the side exit quietly, letting the sound fade behind her. Backstage felt cooler and calmer. The bright lights were gone. The noise softened. She leaned against the wall for a brief moment and closed her eyes. Her heart was still beating fast, but not from fear anymore. It was from release. She had played exactly the way she needed to. Not perfectly, but honestly. That mattered more than any score. A staff member passed by and gave her a small nod. It was not dramatic, but it was different from before. She returned the nod politely. Small changes like that did not escape her notice. She took a seat in the waiting area again. Other contestants glanced at her now, some openly, some quietly. A few smiled. Others looked thoughtful. No one laughed. She kept her gaze low and rested her hands on her knees. The warmth from the piano still seemed to linger in her fingers. She gently moved them, a habit she had formed to calm herself. The competition continued. Another performer walked onto the stage. Applause followed, but the energy felt different now. The audience listened carefully, comparing without meaning to. It was not intentional, but it happened. She listened too, but her mind wandered. Not to the judges or the crowd, but to the path that had led her here. She thought of the long nights, the quiet rooms, the moments when quitting would have been easier. None of it felt wasted now. From time to time, she noticed judges speaking to one another more seriously than before. They leaned closer, pointed at papers, and nodded. Their expressions were focused, not relaxed. One of them glanced in her direction briefly, then looked away. There was no smile this time, just consideration. A short while later, a staff member approached and told her she would be needed again later for feedback and results. The words were simple, but the tone carried weight. She thanked them softly. She moved to a quieter corner of the hall and sat alone. Around her, conversations buzzed. People spoke about technique, emotion, and unexpected performances. She heard parts of her own performance mentioned, though not by name. Someone said they did not expect that level of control. Another said the emotion felt real. She listened without reacting. Praise, like doubt, was something she had learned to hold lightly. Time passed slowly. Waiting always felt longer after something important. She focused on her breathing, steady and even. Eventually, judges began calling contestants one by one for short comments. Some returned looking relieved. Others looked disappointed. Each face told a different story. When it was her turn, she stood up calmly and followed the staff member into a smaller room. The judges sat around a table, papers spread out in front of them. They looked at her differently now. One of them thanked her for her performance. The words were formal but sincere. Another commented on her control and sensitivity. A third mentioned how unexpected her interpretation was. She listened carefully, nodding politely. She did not interrupt. She did not explain herself. She simply received their words with respect. There was a pause. Then one judge asked where she had studied. The question was simple, but the interest behind it was real. She answered briefly, honestly, without trying to impress. There were no famous schools to mention, no big names. Just years of practice and learning wherever she could. The room grew quiet for a moment after her answer. Then one judge nodded slowly. They thanked her again and told her she could wait for the final results. She bowed slightly and left the room. As she walked back into the main hall, she felt lighter. Not because of praise, but because she had been seen for who she was, not who they assumed she was. She returned to her seat and waited. The final announcements took place later that day. Names were read. Applause followed each one. When her number was called, The response was strong, louder than before. She stood, bowed, and sat back down. The judges watched her as she returned to her seat. There was no laughter now, only respect. When the event finally came to an end, people slowly began to leave. Conversations filled the exits. Some contestants hugged friends or family. Others packed quietly and left. She walked out of the hall alone, carrying the same small bag she arrived with. The evening air felt cool against her face. The city lights flickered in the distance. She stopped for a moment on the steps outside and looked back at the building. It no longer felt heavy. It felt like a place she had passed through, not a place that defined her. She took a deep breath and continued walking forward. The laughter that once followed her steps was gone. In its place was something stronger, understanding. The next morning felt quieter than the day before. The hall was the same, but the energy had changed. People moved with purpose now, not excitement. The biggest moments had already happened. What remained were decisions, reflections, and consequences. She arrived early again. This time, the building did not feel intimidating. It felt familiar. She walked through the entrance with steady steps, greeted by the soft echo of voices and footsteps. A few people recognized her and nodded. One person smiled. Small gestures, but meaningful. She took a seat near the side and waited. The final results would be announced later in the day, but there were meetings first. Judges were scheduled to speak with a few contestants again. She did not know what to expect, and she did not let herself imagine too much. Around her, conversations flowed differently now. People spoke with less confidence and more honesty. Some admitted they were surprised by certain performances. Others talked about how difficult it was to judge music fairly. She listened quietly, hands folded, eyes lowered. A staff member approached and asked her to follow. The tone was polite, respectful. She stood and walked behind them into a smaller room, similar to the one before. This time, the judges were already seated, waiting. Their posture was formal, their expressions thoughtful. When she entered, they acknowledged her immediately. One judge began by saying that her performance had stayed with them long after it ended. Another added that it had changed the way they listened to the rest of the competition. The words were calm, not exaggerated, but they carried weight. She listened without reacting much. Her face remained calm, her posture respectful. She had learned not to chase praise. Praise could disappear as quickly as it arrived. They asked her questions about her musical choices, her understanding of the piece, and how she approached practice. The questions were not testing her anymore. They were trying to understand her. She answered honestly using simple words. She spoke about listening, about patience, about letting music breathe. She explained that she practiced slowly, carefully, and always with purpose. She did not try to sound impressive. She spoke the way she always did. One judge leaned back and nodded. Another smiled briefly, then returned to their notes. The meeting ended with thanks and encouragement. They told her she should continue on this path, wherever it led. She bowed slightly and left the room. As she walked back into the main hall, she felt something unfamiliar. Not pride, not relief. Felt more like quiet confirmation. A feeling that the years of effort had not gone unnoticed. She sat down again and waited. Hours passed slowly. The hall filled once more as people returned for the final announcement. Families gathered. Cameras appeared. Whispers spread. She remained still, watching. She had learned patience the hard way. When the judges finally took the stage, the room fell silent. One by one, awards were announced. Applause followed each name. Some smiles were wide. Some faces fell. When her number was called, the applause was immediate. Strong. Clear. She stood and bowed. The moment felt real, not overwhelming. She returned to her seat, heart steady. She did not look around to see who was watching. She did not need to. After the announcements, people began approaching her. Some congratulated her quietly. Others asked questions about her training. A few admitted they had misjudged her. She accepted the words with grace. She did not correct anyone. She did not remind them of the laughter. She understood that growth often came from moments like these. As the hall slowly emptied, one judge approached her directly. The judge spoke kindly, saying that talent like hers should be supported, not questioned. They mentioned opportunities, future events, possible connections. She listened carefully, thanked them, and promised to consider everything. She did not rush into excitement. She had learned to move carefully, thoughtfully. Later, she stepped outside again. The sky was brighter than the night before. The air felt lighter. She walked alone through the city streets, thinking about what had changed. Not the world, not the system, but something inside her. She realized that the laughter from the beginning no longer had power over her. It had faded, replaced by understanding and earned respect. She knew challenges would still come. Doubt would return in other forms. But she also knew that her music could speak when words failed. That knowledge stayed with her as she continued forward, one step at a time. The competition was ending, but her journey was far from over. The days after the competition passed quietly. There were no loud celebrations, no sudden rush of attention that changed everything overnight. She returned to her routine, carrying the experience with her like a calm weight. It was there, steady and real, not something that faded when the noise ended. She stayed in the city for a short while as planned. Mornings were slow. She walked through streets she had only seen briefly before, now noticing small details she had missed. Cafes opening their doors, people hurrying to work, music drifting from open windows. Life moved on just as it always did. She found a small practice room she could use for a few hours each day. It was not fancy. The piano was older, slightly out of tune, but familiar in spirit. She liked it. It reminded her of where she started. She practiced the same way she always had. Slowly, carefully, with attention. The competition had not changed how she played. It had only reminded her why she played. Messages came in quietly. A few invitations. Some kind words. A suggestion to apply for future programs. Nothing overwhelming. Nothing unrealistic. Just doors opening one by one. She read each message carefully and responded with gratitude. She did not rush. She understood that every opportunity came with responsibility. She wanted to be ready. One afternoon, she sat by a window after practice and watched rain fall gently against the glass. She thought about the moment when the judges had laughed. The memory felt distant now, not painful, almost useful. She realized that moment had taught her something important. Not about them, but about herself. She had learned that silence could be powerful, that patience could protect her, that talent did not need to announce itself. When she finally returned home, the journey felt lighter than before. The trains were still crowded, the flights still long, but her heart was steady. Back in her familiar space, she unpacked slowly. Nothing had changed physically. The same small room, the same old piano, the same quiet evenings. She sat down and played. The sound filled the room, just as it always had. No applause followed. No judges listened. And that was okay. She continued practicing daily, sometimes struggling, sometimes improving, sometimes feeling tired. Progress came in small steps, not sudden leaps. She welcomed that. Occasionally, she shared her experience with younger students who asked about competitions and success. She did not speak about awards or praise. She spoke about discipline, about listening, about staying true to the music. She told them that people would doubt them, that laughter might come before understanding, that it was normal. What mattered, she said, was continuing anyway. Months passed. Opportunities grew slowly. She performed in small halls. Sometimes the audience was large. Sometimes it was small. She treated every performance the same. She noticed something interesting. The more she focused on honesty in her playing, the more people connected. Not everyone, but enough. She learned to accept that not all ears were ready to listen. One evening, after a quiet performance, someone approached her and thanked her for the music. They said it reminded them of something they had forgotten. She smiled and bowed politely. That was enough. She never forgot the competition, but it no longer defined her. It became part of her story, not the center of it. She understood now that real recognition did not come from being noticed once. Came from being consistent. She kept going. Years later, when she looked back, she did not remember the laughter as clearly as she remembered the sound of the first note she played that day. The calm, the focus, the truth. She realized that was the moment everything aligned. Not because the judges changed their minds, but because she trusted herself fully. The world would always judge quickly. Appearances would always mislead. Assumptions would always exist. But music, when played honestly, could move past all of that. She continued her journey quietly, step by step, note by note. And wherever she played next, she carried the same belief with her. That real talent does not demand attention. It earns it.